Hello and welcome to Starcodes Astrocast for July 2026. And I had the great privilege of talking to an old friend of mine today, Anne Ortelee. We do Access Astrology together, and I'll give you her interview in a minute. And then the two of us are going to talk about the upcoming wild transits of this July, which just about every astrologer's got a buzz on about right now. So we'll give you our take on it. It's really powerful. And first of all, I want to talk to Anne. And we've been working together since 2002, when I
Mhm.
first moved to New York, and it's been a great collaboration. Uh, how I wanted to hear more from you about how you got into astrology,
Mhm.
and I just want to introduce you as we get started.
Okay.
That you are, you're the director for the C.G. Jung Foundation. You are on certified by, and you way beat me, the Natural Council for Geocosmic Research by NCGR, highest level, level 3, American Federation of Astrologers by OPA, by the International Society for Astrological Research, and the board of IAEA, the International Association of Ethical Astrologers. You've published in the Ingress, Gaia, the NCGR members letter, the Career Astrologer, the ISAR Journal, New York Magazine, Oprah.com, and Broadly.com. Just a few things.
And the
Now,
evolving astrologer. That's another
and
one we
which,
do. Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
and you, how wonderful. Now,
Yeah.
tell me about how you got started in astrology, because you didn't start here, did you?
No.
How did it come
What
to you?
happened? What happened was I was involved. I had a computer consulting business, and I I was working with my partner, and it was midnight, April 1st, 1993, 12:01, and I
Hmm.
said, "You seeing somebody?" And he went, "Well, why do you ask?" And I'm like, "Oh, so it was Saturn on my ascendant, and it was a 14 and a half year relationship at that point. We know Saturn likes to kind of
Hmm.
put us
Hmm.
through our paces at that point. And so that kind of ended. I just signed a huge contract for like a $500,000 with this insurance company. And he was going to do the programming. I was kind of doing the sales and design and all that. And that kind of blew that up. And so there was a process of unwinding, right? But as I unwound, you bring in all these new people. So I brought in a
Hmm.
bunch of witches, basically, and they were all like, your whole life's changing. You should go have an astrology reading. And I'm like, why would I do that? And why would I pay? At that point, it was $150. Why would I pay $150 for what? And they were like, no,
Hmm.
no, no. It's really good when you're at that transitional moment. I'm like, all right. So about a year and 3 months later, I went to see from the breakup. I went to see this astrologer named John Marcasella, who still lives and works downtown on 19th Street. And it's 11:30 on June 18th, 1994, and I go in for a
We
reading.
astrologers do that. We like, and what time was it? When did that
We know
happen?
we
Right.
know the dates. We know the dates.
Right.
We know the time.
Huh.
And I go in, and I'm a little bit into it, and I go, there was this guy. At that point, Saturn had progressed to my moon, so I kind of burst into tears.
Hmm.
My little moon in Pisces.
Hmm.
And he said, what was his birthday? And he got the ephemeris out. And I was in sales, so we were trained to read upside down on desks.
Hmm.
Like you go in the office and you just read what they got on the top pile, right? Gives you a
Hmm.
lot of info. And he looked at this book of numbers, and he was a Cancer, and he was born on my prenatal eclipse, actually the day before, because he had a moon in Gemini, and the prenatal eclipse was Cancer Cap. And he started talking about him and the relationship and the issues with his mother and just all this stuff. And then he looks at me and goes, "Didn't you break up with him 7 years ago?" And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "You should have stayed broken up." And of course, when I broke up with him, all my friends were like, "We hate him. We hate him." So when he came back in, through the doghouse door, I didn't tell anybody. So 7 years later, it happened. They're all like, "Oh, we got rid of him 7 years ago." I said, "Well, yeah, not really.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not really. Those past life prenatal eclipse ones are hard to get rid of."
Yeah, they are.
So the women, one of the women had a country house in Pennsylvania, so we were all going up to the house for the weekend. And one of them, and they were like, "Can we hear your reading?" I'm like, "No," because I'd left the reading and gotten in the car with the tape. They'd pick me up in front of his house, and I'm like, "No, you can't hear it." But then I said, "How did he do that?" And one of them said, "Well, he teaches it. You can learn it." I said, "Really?" Now I'm a Virgo. We hate to make the same mistake twice. You know that, Heather.
Mhm,
We have our
mhm.
little Virgo shared things. Like, no, really,
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, no.
Fool me once, fool me
Mhm,
twice. So I called him on Monday when we got back in the city, and I said, "I'd like to learn how you did that." And he goes, "I'm starting a beginner class in the fall." So the day after my birthday, I went and sat in his apartment for 2.5 years on Monday nights on the couch. And I learned basic astrology, predictive Western. And so I consider him to be my astrological dad. And then he's a Capricorn, Aquarius, Moon in Cap, Mercury in Cap. So you know,
good teacher.
he's a teacher, but there's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm a Virgo. I like to fix things. Not that you can always,
No, I understand.
but I like to try. I like to think I can. Right. So we got into this one dialogue at one point where he was talking about synastry, which is relationship astrology. And he said,
Mhm.
so, if you're of a Venus Saturn aspect, you're going to pull in people with a Venus Saturn aspect. So I started to argue with him. And, I'm like, well, and I'm giving him he goes, okay, so Anne's had therapy. So she won't pull in a person with a Venus Saturn aspect, but the rest of your clients will. And I went, okay. It felt like faded.
Right, that we're not fated. That I think that's something
Yeah,
approach you
but
and I have.
that's Capricorn, right?
Yeah, and I think it's the Virgo is a healer. We want to work on this is this is your pre-inclined. What can we do to ameliorate that, fix that, remedy the situation? How else can you redirect that? That to me is
Right.
the power of
That
astrology.
was that was kind of it. So, and
Hmm.
then I was interpreting a chart in class, and I went and he looked at me and went, "You're my student." And I was like, but this person then has this, like, they need to have hope, you know. And so I started studying with another. I mean, I kept studying with him because I was really learning a lot. But I started studying with the Gemini, with a Sag rising and a Moon Pluto in Leo. So she
Hmm. Hmm.
was, what's the karma? What's the purpose? She's a therapist. And you have these choices. These things come in. What are they teaching you? What you're learning? All that. So she became my astrological mother, and
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
little more spiritual because of the Sag
Hmm.
Gemini. And kind of more. How can we? Again, optimistic. She worked as a Catholic Relief Service. Her name's Eileen McCabe, and she was is a great
Oh,
therapist.
she's wonderful.
She's
Yeah,
wonderful, excellent
she's
astrologer too.
wonderful.
So she was my
Hmm.
mother that gave me
Hmm.
the optimistic, and he
Hmm.
was my dad who gave me this is how taught me how to drive the car basically, and then would yell at me when I stalled out, coming out of first gear, and stopped in the first gear.
Hmm.
But they both were excellent teachers, and then I just kept going, and I want to say about 2 or 3 months into learning with him on the couch, I'm like, this is like our user manual. This is our operation system, because I'm thinking computers. This is our operating system.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, we should learn this like in first grade, like, because it would make life so much easier. So that was the beginning. And then, as with astrology, it comes in and it kind of percolates in there, and then it grows and it
It
gets to
grows in the back of your mind.
goes in the back of your mind. And
Those
so,
archetypes, they keep growing. I mean, you can just put it down for 6 months and come back, and it's grown. The details are
yes,
missing, but your understanding of it usually grows.
you don't have to water it, it grows.
Mm-mm.
And so I was still doing computer stuff, but I was really, bringing my books with me and learning. And there was a big thing called Y2K, year 2K, which all the computers were going to crash because we didn't store the 19.
Mm-hmm.
We just did so now we're going to the 2000s. So math's going to be off, the interest rates, everything's going to be screwed up. So there was a lot of IT expense, a lot of IT jobs. So I got a great IT job, flew around the country carrying my books with me. And then we finished, and then the companies were all like, we just spent millions of dollars on your people, goodbye. And they laid off all these IT people. And I was kind of like, they were like, well, we'll keep you if you wanted. I said, no, I really want to go be an astrologer because now it's 7 years. Because because I sat on John's couch in 94. So I said to my dad, I want to be an astrologer. And he was like, I want my college tuition money back. And I said, you didn't give it to me. You gave it to the college, right? To them. But I went to St. Bonaventure, and he was an astrologer. And they were the Franciscans, brother, sun, sister, moon, and many, many of the bishops and the cardinals in the church, because it was a sign of education, knowing astrology. When back in the day, it was taught in universities. And so I did that. In 9/11, my office blew up. Now, I'm a little wimpy Virgo, so I'm doing readings. And I have a list and I have a plan. I know how many readings I have to do a week to get to pay my bills. And then my birthday was September 11th. So I'd started on John's couch September 10th. And so my birthday, my office blew up. I was home because I always take my birthday off. And my office mates were caught in that dust cloud where everybody was all gray. And I kind of took it as a sign. All right, can't go there. Might as well just go be an astrologer. And so I went full time.
And that was right on your birthday. So
right, my birthday. And the learning astrology was 7 years earlier on my birthday. So
perfect.
Yeah. So
I
went
Saturn Square.
Yeah, full time in 2001. And then I never really looked back. It just kind of kept learning new things, kept reading clients, kept, moving forward. I love it. When I was younger, I wanted to be a priest. I have a Sag midheaven. And I was told, girls can't be priests. And I'm like, but, talking to people about their souls and their path and where they are. It's so important, and having someone to talk to. And truth be told, that's what I did anyway. I'd walk in on a sales call and somebody'd be crying at the front desk. And I go, are you okay? And well, the grandchild just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. I'm like, okay. So then I'm in the back helping them program. And every week I check on the grandchild with the brain tumor, so I was doing that kind of work, but not in a paid capacity.
Right. There's a line from an Episcopal communion prayer, which is to do the good works you walk into today. And that, you never know what you're going to walk into. How do you just show up and do what you can?
Exactly. Right. And that's how it grew. I just kept showing up and doing the work and offering, well, this is it, you have this Venus Saturn affliction, but let's work with it. Let's learn about it. Let's make it conscious, which is the Jungian stuff, which is all about individuation and learning, making we all have a conscious, think of your belly button as the divider. This is the conscious part. Below the belly button is the unconscious. And then our personal unconscious is like a belt around us. So if I say, what'd you have for dinner last night? You go and retrieve it and you bring it up, right? And so the idea of our universal archetypes, I was in a class and the teacher asked me to explain Jung's chart and stuff. And I did it. And one of the guys in the class goes, this sounds like his archetype stuff. I said, well, he had charts on every patient and his daughter was a famous astrologer. So he used the gift of astrology as the oldest psychological analysis there was when he was helping his patients heal. So that was kind of a natural place. And then the whole concept of individuation, like you have to emerge from your youth, your childhood, and you grow into who you're going to become and helping people do that, and yeah.
That's powerful.
So when John said to me in that first reading, he's gone, you got a whole new life coming in. You don't even know what it is yet. Hang in there.
And boy, was he right.
And there was a whole new life. So here I am 32 years later. You and I are chatting on the internet.
And we've been working together for a lot of that time.
Yep.
How did you get involved with all the various astrological organizations? Because you went straight into the deep end and got certified by all of them. Tell us about your journey with them.
Well, what happened was John, John's NCGR. That's his land.
That's how I knew him.
The East Coast is NCGR. Everybody's got their section, for lack of a better word. And so I'm taking the class, and he said, well, you could sit to be certified. I said, really? What certification? So I would finish the level and I would sit for the exam. And so that kind of happened. And then when I went out in the world and there were other people, I was like, oh, I like how that person works. And then what do they do? Because that's what we do. Oh, they have an ESAR certification. Let me go check that out. And then as I got older and I started teaching students, the ones that like math, send them to NCGR. The
Yep.
ones that are a little more Neptunian, send them to ESAR because they don't have to do math calculations for that. But I want them to be certified that they've got a body of knowledge, that they've been
Right.
recognized, they get a little stamp on their forehead that says, you know what you're doing. So I was always an advocate for certification. So I would bring in the ESAR people to New York and do certification weekends with them.
Wonderful.
And then, the NCGR had regular testing in the New York area. So a lot of my students are certified.
And how about the International Association of Ethical Astrologers?
That came up as um, in response to the Me Too movement, which is alive and well in the astrology community too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there were some nasty instances that it had happened,
Like every
and
field,
every field. And
every
so
field.
we kind of did, okay, what is the point of being, what is an ethical astrologer? What does that
Right.
look like? And it ran into, some things, like, well, the French astrologers, they sleep with their clients, so they're not going to be ethical astrologers in the way Americans are defining
Right.
it.
Right.
But the idea was, what's our ethical code? And actually, under each of the different organizations, they all have an ethics component to them. So it was kind of like having it be more of a, I agree to follow these ethics, these behavioral things. And basically, it's do no harm. But
Mm-hmm.
also understanding, one of the things that happens when you know someone's chart, and at that point, there were a series of ethical violations that appeared in the astrology community with men. No, don't know of any women, but men kind of abusing younger students or younger people, and in both in gay and straight environments. And of course, they were recognized as leaders in the field, and so nobody was saying anything or doing anything. So it was kind of like, we need to maybe do this and get this kind of up and going. So that was where that came from. But it was more in response. It was the Eris square Pluto time.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's been so important for people to have also a place to go if they feel like this is unethical. Because astrology gives you this great body of knowledge, but
great power.
unless you've been through all the various certifications, and even then it's questionable, how you use that, what's the wisdom that you bring to that, what's the heart you bring to that, what's the empathy,
Mm-hmm.
is a good question. And anytime you know something and they come to you for it, clients go into a mild trance and they look up to you. It's like going to a doctor. Any
Mm-hmm.
of those, or a lawyer, when you are in a vulnerable position where you seem to have a body of knowledge. That's why you have to be so careful what you say to them, because you're seeding their subconscious. And you have to be, that's why I try to put things as spaciously as possible, give them as many options, because you're seeding their subconscious because they go into that mild trance, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to help them open up to possibilities, not limit
Mm-hmm.
them.
Right.
You're taking that role seriously, and that women have to watch out for who do they give their power to, and
And
to
sometimes it's
become
assault.
the astrologer. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I had one of my students was actually assaulted by somebody, and had been talking to him, studying with him, and got discounts and all this stuff. And then he grabbed her in a room at a conference. He was totally freaked out, totally freaked
I
out.
bet.
And
I bet.
also, like, it's also how you say things, because technically
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to, you can see in the person's chart all the story that's going on, but people don't understand that. So they'll go, "Can you look at my daughter's chart? Right? Can you look at my kid's chart?"
Mm-hmm.
And the way I handle it is I say, well, it's all in your chart, but I'll look at their chart. But then I'm
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm-hmm.
respectful of where the parent and the child boundaries are and what are they asking about. So
Right.
I had one just the other day, and her daughter's 23 and has a bad dude,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents are very worried, and they're supporting her because she's in school, and this guy's living with her, kind of, sort of, maybe, but flies in and out, and he's not paying any rent, and he's not doing any of that kind of, behaviory stuff. More in the using category. So she's freaked out. And I'm like, this is a 23-year-old kid. This is her life. This is her bad dude. We all have one, sometimes more.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm trying to straddle that moral line, right? And I say to her, well, this guy's a little like Brett Kavanaugh. And I set her right off, right? And I got a flaming email back. And then she'd gone and consulted with another astrologer who had said, I don't know where she gets that he's like Brett Kavanaugh. I'm like, look at the Venus in Aquarius and the moon in Cancer. He's Brett Kavanaugh. Like, what do you mean you don't see it? And I said, is the person certified? She goes, yes, very certified astrologer. They didn't understand it. And she was so freaked. I said, all right, well, we'll talk more about it. And, come on back. And, I gave her an hour free because I'd blown her out. And I was trying to be respectful of the daughter and being respectful of the boundaries, but affirming that she was correct in her instincts, but at the same time. And I just happened to pick, they have the same chart. He's charming, charming, charming if you're in a subservient position to him and he's your boss and he does Big Daddy. But then when we watched him be questioned by Kamala Harris and you saw the anger and the rage
And the little pouty lip.
That's him. He's got both sides there. So that, but I tried my best. I was very conscious of trying to do it, but sometimes we'll see what happens. But
And we see charts. I used to use the charts of people that were born on the same day, very close to the same time as real bad guys. There's a wonderful German, Hungarian movie, Hanussen, about a hypnotherapist that was born. They mention it halfway through the film on the same day as Hitler. And you see the work going through, but he's using his power to control other people for a very different purpose. And that's a soul choice. That's not because the chart says it has the same proclivities. How are they using it? Right. So you were saying you're right. He could go bad. It's up to him, but these are things to watch out for. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry that did she calm down finally?
Yeah, she did. We had a nice long conversation. But I also I wrote down, like, send this to the other astrologers so they can, I didn't feel appropriate saying who was it. But I sent this to the other astrologers so they can see. I did Brett Kavanaugh's chart and this guy's chart because they're the same person, right? And sometimes it's really weird, Heather. Way back when I was first a baby astrologer, I had a group of people that would meet at my house on once a month. We'd all do potluck and bring a dish. Mm-hmm. And the chart had been presented in the group of a woman who had tried to kill her husband and burn her children to death. And she lived on the East Coast. Eastern time zone, and her father was a professional football player, and it was all this stuff, right? So it was a story. And then I get on the phone with my friend who lives in Charlotte Central Time, and he's involved with a guy, and the guy is got the same chart as this woman that tried to kill her husband and burn the children to death, right? So now they're moving to Philly, and I'm like, wow. Really? You're moving to Philly? He's like, yeah. I said, well, I had this, like when this chart moves to the East Coast, it gets mean, And so I kind of said, be a little, conscious, a little careful or whatever. And he's like, they'd been together like a year and a half, 2 years, enough to move together to Philly because he was going to go to therapy school there at University of Penn. And the partner moved a month before he got there. And he got there and came home like a week into the Philly job with all of his clothes all on the street. The guy had thrown them out the window and set a couple of them on fire. And the dog escaped. He didn't kill the dog because he liked the dog. But, but the guy went crazy because he moved there. Now we see it like with Johnny Depp. He was out west and he had his friend die in the Viper Lounge. And he went off to the east to France, met Vanessa, had the kids, turned into Johnny Depp, and then went back to LA because of the Hunter Thompson who blew his head off and suicided. And then Johnny got into the drugs and ran into Amber. And there was this which is like, Johnny, don't live in LA. Go back to France. Like this is not a good place for you to be. And so being able to say that and being able to explain it to people, and sometimes illness. My sister's boss had cancer in Colorado. They moved to Florida, and she wanted to stay alive to see her daughter graduate from high school. The husband got transferred back to Colorado. The cancer came back,
Mm-hmm.
and they came back to Florida. At that point, I met her, and I said, "Don't go back to Colorado. Next time he gets a promotion, stay in Florida. Let him travel the country, and you stay here because your chart is healthier here than it is in Colorado. Colorado makes you sick." And she's
Because it
waiting
moves everything to the 6th and 12th.
between 6 and 5.
Yep.
And she is waiting for her daughter's granddaughter to graduate from high school, which happens this year. So she was waiting for her kid to graduate. She wanted to stay alive that long.
Mm-hmm.
Been alive now, 30 years because they stayed in Florida. So it's also sometimes we live in places that aren't healthy for us. And so that you can help people.
Oh, yeah. I have 4
location.
planets in the 12th house in the East Coast, and I can do really deep work there. And I do deep work every time I go back. But the minute you get me west of the Mississippi, all those planets move into the 1st, and my health is so much better. So I know that I have a specific length of time that I can spend back east.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's incredibly valuable information as far as I'm
Very
concerned.
valuable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yep, safer and healthier out here for me.
Yeah.
And it is, we can help with people. And it's much more complicated. There's a lot of cheap AI astrocartography stuff on the web these days. It is so much more complicated. The subtle things that you have to take a look at it in many different ways, really looking at the relocation chart,
Right.
not just the maps.
Right.
So these places where they say you have to move to, Givenchy, France, or else you're dead, they're misrepresenting the
They're
field.
missing important parts. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be more empowering than that. And like, how do you work with it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so you've had quite a journey, and it's done you well, and it stood by you. And I still remember the most amazing for me tour de force, because as a Virgo, I like practicalities also. The metaphysics is such an important, what I love about astrology is that language, that the same aspect echoes on a very practical level, on the mundane level, on our social interactions, and on our spiritual thing. The metaphor holds through. And we can often, you can't say, where does it start? Does it start in the physical, or does it start in the metaphysical? It's continuous full flow. How do we see that aspect and work with it?
Mm-hmm.
But you had come to stay with me, and we were going off to do a talk for the NCGR chapter
out in Minnesota Stars, is my memory.
Minnesota Stars. And I had lost my car keys. And you went whoop, and you pulled out and did a quick mundane chart for the moment, horary, and said it is upstairs in this corner of the house under something that's white, close to the floor, but not on the floor. And I went upstairs to my bedroom, which is that corner of the house, and under a piece of paper on my bedside table were my car keys. And to me, that will always be, you made clear from your very first story about the breakup with the man that you also have great intuition that works with all these symbols. And the symbols give us a structure to use our intuition. But your intuition around the horary was pretty spectacular to me.
Yeah, I love horary. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. But it's a one and done. So you're kind of like, I'd rather talk to you for a long time than just go, well, right. And we did find the car keys. So that was a goal. That was the goal of the matter, right? Yeah.
Right. We found them when we got there, and then you did a great workshop.
Yeah.
So, we're taking this from here. We're both excited about this year, and we've talked about how all the planets, all the major outer planets, Jupiter heads into Leo this weekend, and they will all have shifted out of their yin, water, and air signs to yang, fire, water and earth signs to fire and air, these dynamic aspects coming up. And now, in as they all have such different time zones, Pluto 248 years, Neptune 165, uh, Uranus 84, all of them kind of lock in at different schedules that they all line up at 4 degrees. And if you think of the degrees, there's 30 degrees to a sign. That's where in the block it is. They're all like all on
All the
all these
same.
different blocks in exactly the same place talking to each other. And I like the chart for June, uh, and I took out some of the other things just to see the pattern more
Yeah.
clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But for July 19th at 9:30 in the morning, because it puts Moon right in there.
Yeah.
And so it's Moon, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all at the same degree. Now,
Mm.
a few of them are retrograde, a few of them are moving forward, so this does not last at this particular resonance, but it
Right.
really seeds a moment in time. What are you seeing with this? And
Well, back to the horary energy. Pluto went into Aquarius for good for true November 14th of 24. Uranus just went into Gemini the end of April this year. He
mm-hmm,
was in it a
mm-hmm.
little bit, and Saturn and Neptune played around in it last summer, but they got married on February 20th at 0. And when planets are 3 degrees in horary, we say it's too soon to ask the question. So these guys have all been roaming around at 3 degrees, causing their little excitements in their sections of the sky. But this is the first time they sit down to talk to each other. So the analogy I'm using is they've all gotten on a plane, they've flown to the convention, they've unpacked, and they're going down to the opening session. Mm-hmm. And this configuration is in orb. This is the perfection of it, but it's in orb for like a week. So we're going to feel it kind of coming in on the 17th when the moon in the Venus and the South Node are at 4, the midpoint of them are at 4, Virgo. And then we have the Libra moon right behind it, really sets off this beautiful, lovely crystalline structure. And then they open up a little. So the planets are at 4, which is, of course, a square in our land, which means action. When you're sitting there with a leg, it's a 90-degree energy because we divide the circle by 4. So when your thighs and your shins, and when you go to stand up, it's a little work. But the planets are all in their new signs, and they have not been in these signs. Jupiter was in Leo 12 years ago. Saturn was in Aries back in 97, 98. But Pluto hasn't been in Aquarius since 1777. Neptune hasn't been in Aries since the 1860s, the Civil War. And of course, Pluto was the American Revolutionary War. Uranus hasn't been in Gemini since June of 41, which was World War II. And it was there also at the Civil War, and it was there at the Revolutionary War. None of us have lived through these planets. That's the other thing. So when you're on the internet and people are going, none of us have lived. One of them's 84 years, one's 165, the other's 250. And unless you're a vampire, you haven't been here that long.
Right.
So the energy of it, but because they're all talking to each other, and now they're at a manifesting number. 4s are where we manifest things. Mm-hmm. We take, and the planets have all calmed down from their 3, where they're wandering around. What am I doing? What am I doing? And they're meeting up. So there's power in that resonance. Mm-hmm. And then when you throw the Libra moon in, you kind of add another element of air. So the only thing we're missing is 4 Sag, right at the bottom. And actually, literally, with this chart, it's at the bottom. 4 Sag is down there.
And when we discuss the Sabian symbols, that missing point, it has a really interesting meaning.
So when you sit down and you look at the points, you look and see if you have any planets at 4, because these planets are going to come in and hang on them, and they're going to invite your planets to the party. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And by that, we also mean your ascendant and your midheaven too, and your IC and your descendant. So let's talk Sabian images. Sabian images are Elsie Wheeler channeled them with Mark Edmund Jones in San Diego at Balboa Park. And he held the image and she said the word. And so they're very potent. I have no idea how they work, but they work really well. Mm-hmm. And they describe the energy of the degree and the imagery that we can expect because of this configuration.
Right.
So what?
And so the 5 Aquarius, where Pluto will be, because when you're looking at the Sabian symbols, it's 4 plus any part of it. You always read 5, not 4.
Right.
The 5 Aquarius is the Council of Ancestors, and the image that we're going to be sitting with our ancestors all the other times in history that resonate with this, and there are not many, but that we're pulling in something bigger than just our temporary time slot. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
see this. Council of Ancestors. 5 Leo, where Jupiter will be, the rock formation at the edge of a precipice. And I think, well, the rock formation at the edge of the precipice, something to hang on to so you are safe when you're leaning over. It can be strength at the edge of change. It's a really interesting image.
And
5 Aries,
if you're into hang gliding, it can be what you jump off of
right,
to fly into the valley. Yeah.
right. It can be dangerous. You could also what you fly into if you're trying to land on. But 5 Aries, where Neptune will be, is a triangle with wings. And one version of that was the ability to rise above the ordinary and integrate the concrete and the spiritual. And to think of that's what this, Neptune is calling us to not get lost where it did in Pisces in religion and theory and ideas and necessarily feelings and not facts and illusions, but to rise above and above the ordinary, but integrate the concrete with the spiritual. I think it's really beautiful. Uranus, the change agent, will be at 5 Gemini, which is the image for that is a radical magazine. The idea to challenge the status quo through communication, the role of the mind in social evolution, and the importance of disseminating ideas to mobilize action and reform. We couldn't make a better version of this than if we tried, but these people did this, came up with those power of those symbols a long time ago. 5 Libra, where the moon will be that trigger that day, because the moon often acts, it's a minor thing, goes through it all every month, but it will act as a trigger sometimes, is a man teaching the true inner knowledge of the new world to his students. So this is a moment of a chance for us to learn. And the missing corner, what we have to add in, when there's something missing in your chart, in natally, we tend to draw people and experiences in to fill in that corner because we naturally love mandalas. We are naturally whole. So the point that we're asked to bring in is an old owl up a tree. And one description was this symbol represents the necessary elements of steadiness in human affairs and emphasizes the importance of self respect and normalcy in life. It suggests that the individual should be willing to process lessons from their mistakes and struggles. And again, that comes back to how do we integrate the concrete and the spiritual during this time of wild changes, to work with the changes and see their spiritual perspective and then figure out what to do practically about that, and to add that our job will be to add steadiness and self-respect and normalcy and bring that back in, because Lord knows it's gotten threadbare this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought those symbols were pretty powerful in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted you point to you were talking about how Uranus was in Gemini during all the major events in our country's life. So we're coming back into another Uranus return, as was the Civil War. It is a time it says, do you want to break up into two countries? Do you want to split up into two directions? Do you want to, how do you feel about that polarization? Because Gemini can be that. Part of the twin is, the good thing is versatility from Gemini, but the challenge can be that the splitting, the fracturing,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's going to be an interesting lineup. And on that day, we're close to a Mars return too, so we'll see.
Mars
But,
return for the country. Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. The other thing is, notice in this case, the Venus and the Jupiter in the inner circle, that's 4 degrees Cancer.
mm-hmm.
And while it's not
That's
tying
where it's
into
going
the
to take the
flame
hit.
there,
Mm-hmm,
they're going to be it's going to be talking to the planets at 4. So all the
mm-hmm,
planets in your
mm-hmm,
chart that are at 4 are going to be connecting with this in some way, shape, or form.
mm-hmm.
And so that's always important because we don't really think of it that way. That, well, I have a 4 degree this and a 4 you at the 4 is that. It's like, yeah. So when I look at my chart, I have a lot of stuff at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So my Venus is 4 Scorpio. So
Ah.
she's gonna get picked up in here. My moon is 6 Pisces. It's gonna get picked up in here. My
Mm-hmm.
midheaven is
Mm-hmm.
5 Sag. It's gonna get in this mix. So
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna watch as the stuff comes in. And then the other part is because none of us have lived through this before, it's very helpful to make a list of words. So when Uranus went into Pisces, Uranus is unusual, weird, different, break apart, odd looking. And that was when Uggs and Crocs were
Eccentric.
invented. And Crocs had those little holes in them so you could
And
decorate
Pisces, it
them.
rules the feet, right?
Pisces rules the feet. And you could decorate your shoes with charms, which is a Virgo thing. Every Virgo I know has a charm bracelet. And they got it when they were young. And so the energy of that, so making a list of Gemini words and Uranus words, and if you know your chart and what house it's in, whatever house it's in, the listing for those houses, and you kind of do a Chinese menu where you egg roll and you do the soup and then you do the entree. And you can then give yourself different ways of thinking about this energy because none of us have ever
Mhm.
lived through it before.
I agree. And I think of this, Uranus, where you have 4 Gemini. And again, when there's so many planets talking to you together, it's hard to, it's like listening to a symphony. The sound is what they all create together. Can you really pick out the French horns and the drum and the violin completely separately without time and training, or you can just be affected by this wall of the beauty that they create together? This can be quite beautiful, or it can be systematic. I mean, huge changes we're going through, but it will be hard to separate out all these feelings. But we do have to look at, where Pluto is where is your life going through the deepest level of transformation?
Mhm.
What house? Because Pluto will go slowly through a house. You can just go through your life and see what house Pluto was going through in your chart to see where was the platform for transformation for you. That's the big background one. Neptune, where is the connection? Where is that? Are you being spiritually challenged to really be honest with yourself and look for the truth? And where are you dealing with the dynamic vulnerability? How does that working for you? How do you create safety around vulnerability? It's one of
Mhm.
the things I'm seeing around that Neptune in Aries. Uranus, where are you going to feel the change? What's the catalyst for the where is the clutch being thrown in your life? And Jupiter, where is the room for expansion, but also where are you having to make sure that you take your space and don't let someone else eat up all the oxygen in the room, nor eat theirs? Tell me more about what you see in how these planets, what when they talk to your chart, Anne.
Well, I like the mystic, we look at configurations, right, to see what
Right.
they are. So we can see in there's a big blue triangle, and that's
Mm-hmm.
an air triangle with lots of ideas, ideas,
Mm-hmm.
ideas, ideas. Now, if you have a little point, like I happen to do at 4 Sag, it's going to form what we call a kite. But in this chart, there's definitely a big triangle there. And you can see the triangle where you make Pluto be the bottom of the kite and make Jupiter be the top of the kite
Mm-hmm.
because we have the grand trine in air and then it shoots into fire. And then you can make the grand trine in air and then it shoots into Neptune in fire. So there's two kites which take the air planets and want to direct them in some passionate way, fiery way, because air is all about ideas. Then we have a thing in there called a mystic rectangle. You can see the rectangle there that runs from Jupiter over to Neptune, down to Pluto, over to the moon. And mystic rectangles have callings where we're called to go forward and do things. The universe says, hey, come do this with me. And so we get kind of special. I always think of it as when I'm doing a reading, I say to the person, you get special assignments.
Mm-hmm.
So the chart's going to call you to do your special assignment and then think about where it lands in your chart, because this is the chart for 9:30 in the morning, but where do you have your Libra planets? Because that's going to be one of the, grand trines are kind of like active systems. They go like this, because the planets all are talking to each other and they're happy to be doing so. And they're all fired up. And we don't have a grand trine in fire because we don't have Sag involved, but we do have a trine between Jupiter and Neptune. And of course, they're siblings, right? So they're brothers kind of getting along and figuring out how to do stuff. So when we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at
Mm-hmm.
the heavens, we got Grandpa in there with Uranus, and we have a bunch of siblings, Pluto, Jupiter, and Neptune. And then we threw in the moon, and we throw in, the Venus. I would put in the Venus South Node conjunction at 4. So we have this energy that wants us to take action and get things done, and it's a little impatient, right? And we do see Mars in Gemini, and we also notice Mercury's retrograde. So the Mars and the Mercury, you may have to do it a couple of times. It may have some false starts, but because it's a really fast moving energy system, it's going to invite us all into this new vision. And part of what we're doing is we're finishing up 35 years of Earth and Water. Saturn and Neptune met in 88, 89 in Capricorn. And this year they met in fire, right, on February 20th. And back then in 88, 89, the Berlin Wall, it was Capricorn walls.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
rules, it's kind of older. So Europe's older. And the Berlin Wall fell, and the EU got together and formed. Russia broke up. The USSR broke up into pieces.
And
And it
the
was,
Exxon Valdez crashed into a rock and broke
yeah.
open.
And we also had the Tiananmen Square.
Mm-hmm.
So we know those were major realignments in the world. And now with Saturn Neptune on what's called a world point, we also look at when the last time these
And can
planets,
you remind my audience what the world point is?
what the world point are the seasonal changes. So 0 Aries, 0 Cancer,
Mm-hmm.
0 Libra, 0 Cap. And then halfway through, there's cross quarter days, which
Right.
are, like we call it Groundhog Day, but back then it was Candlemas. Beltane, which is May Day, and then Lammas, and then the Celtic New Year, Samhain, which is November 1st. So halfway through the season. So those points are considered when planets are on them. Pagans used to gather and celebrate. The seasons
Mm-hmm.
change and shift. So we watch them carefully because they give us a different feeling of things. So we
Mm-hmm.
also look at what the degree the conjunction were. So the last time that Saturn and Neptune, they've met in Aries before, but the last time they met at 0 Aries was when we went 7,000 years ago. We went from the fertility age to the Bronze Age, where men figured out that their sperm made the babies, and they made metal that they could take over the farming community and I can come take your stuff. So technically, kind of the beginning of patriarchy. And now Michael Luton, who is a very famous astrologer who passed recently, would always say 2000 is the millennial of women. And of course, power never gives up power easily. And so we're seeing quite a bit of backlash, in terms of roles and things like that, and expectations of men and women. But this, we know the nature, we know the universe rolls forward. The earth spins forward. It doesn't go backward, it spins forward. And, that quote, the moral arc of the universe bends forward, and we help it bend. So these energies about what we think and what we're inspired by, and what are we, the universe is going to say, well, this is what you're inspired. Are you willing to make an emotional commitment to it and have it create? Notice none of these planets are in Earth, except
None.
that little Venus and Virgo over there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so are you willing to make an emotional commitment? Mercury in Cancer, retrograde, maybe, maybe not. Because if you have to go from talking and seeing to emotionally committing, and then you manifest. So it's a really interesting energy, because it's not like the day is going to happen and you're going to manifest. But what's going to happen is there's going to be some big turning point where you go, wow, is that my new path? And a lot of people, because we're shifting from earth and water, which is very stable, reliable. Think of earth, it doesn't move. Water sits in the vase or the container it's in. We're going to fire and air. The breeze comes in, comes out. We chat with people. We relate. The Gulf Stream at the top, 500 miles an hour. Air, fire matches, fireplace fire, or candle fire.
Mhm.
And which kind of fire? You're going to just light a match, which, wakens the darkness? Are you going to build a fireplace? Or are you just going to take your light and spread it around? And so these are the questions the universe is asking each of us as it says 35 years of fire and air, get ready. And we're starting it now.
We
And
are.
this is when all the planets actually go, yeah, we're here. We're all in place. We're all, we've hired the team to do it.
Right.
And everybody's at 4 ready. And think about a 4-year-old. They know they like carrots. They don't like broccoli. That skirt makes an itch. I don't like that. I love that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And it's going to be an interesting month anyway. It's starting off with Mercury retrograde,
yeah,
and Mercury turns retrograde on the 30th, and it will be retrograde until the 24th. And those are two times that we're going to be in this review session as all those planets hit.
yeah.
Now, right over July 4th weekend, I'm a little worried as we see that Uranus Mars conjunction uh,
Gemini.
in Gemini at 4 degrees and starting this process. So it's going to be a trigger. It could be a break open, or it could be a breakdown. We'll see. It will certainly help the World Cup be just as juicy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw, it, when we talk about the chart of America taking it on, that Jupiter and Venus in the seventh house, that kind of, which often means great allies, and they've been that our great allies have been taking such heat from the planets as all the planets that are talking to those degrees right now are not in comfortable relationships. So it's semi-sextiles, quincunx. It's uncomfortable relationships. Square that Venus and Jupiter, and our as a country, we've been going through such a challenging time with reorganizing our relationships with other countries, former allies, because we've got someone who keeps putting his foot in his mouth around that. But we also are seeing as the World Cup is unfolding that we do have that goodwill and that love and the ability to connect with others that Venus and Jupiter conjunct in the seventh would suggest. That we have that capacity. We haven't lost it. It's just been under tremendous fire right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of it, a lot of them are doing eating tours, which I think of as fire. And remember,
And very Cancer.
very Cancer. But Prometheus, remember, he was a Titan, and he felt we should have fire, and he gave us fire. And Jupiter got mad at him and tied him to a rock and had his liver eaten out every day by an eagle. But when we were able to eat and able to cook meat, it allowed our frontal cortex to really develop.
Mm-hmm.
Because we weren't just hunter gatherers, we could also be warm.
And we had
We
protein.
could also take care of ourselves, and so nurture ourselves because of the warmth and with the cooked food, and it shifted our biology. And so what we're having here is this very Promethean transition where we're being asked to look at our personal fire and what is our vision for ourselves. And then once we have our vision for ourselves, then we can have a vision for our family and our community, and then we can have a vision for the greater collective. So when I say to people, it really looks like the world is messed up, but what it's doing is it's going through this transition.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
the air and the fire is I have this idea and I have a vision. And this whole year, Mercury, the planet of my mind and my communication ability, is retrogrades in water. So Mercury says, are you going to emotionally commit to this? And then you go, yeah, I am. I will emotionally commit to it. Or no, I don't really want to emotionally commit to it. I don't like it. And so because I didn't take the phone off the hook. I guess the universe is adding.
The universe says,
no idea who that is. Latina is the monk.
You have a very thoughtful and conversant phone. One of the things that the Uranus, this is also the beginning of 5 Uranus Pluto trines,
Yes.
and that will be now through summer of 2027, always actually through 2028. And this cycle began in the mid 60s when those two conjunct, but every major technological development I've been able to find has happened while these two planets were talking to each other. From the Gutenberg Bible in 1455 on down, the first steam engine, the first calculator, first gas powered auto, first plane, first nuclear bomb were all while Uranus and Pluto were talking to each other. Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean necessarily good breakthroughs. I think it's by the end of this, by the summer of 2028, we'll have a better picture about all the problems and gifts that AI is bringing, but it will definitely change the world. The way it's coming in on a time that will really shift things, whether we like it or not. So, learning how to work with it, learning how to not necessarily in our daily lives, but the effect it's having on the job market and on how people live and how diseases are being diagnosed. There are it's rife with gifts and challenges, and I don't think we can even begin to see how much it's going to change.
Yeah.
And
Like a revolutionary change. But
mhm,
also, we have to ground ourselves. We're electrical systems, being very stimulated by all this air and fire. You
yes,
need to do if you know what your moon is, you need to do it.
hmm
Look at the degree of the moon, like in this case, Saturn is 14 degrees. So Saturn's 14, and then divide the minutes by 5 to get the months. So he's 14 and 10 months old. What does a 14 and 10-month old Saturn like to do? And kind of, like I have a moon in Pisces, but it's 6. So I'm like, rub my feet, put me in a bathtub, go for a petty, soak my feet
uh,
in Epsom salt, wear really, really cozy socks,
oh, that's lovely.
that little, and go take a nap. you know,
Mine's in Scorpio, and I don't want to talk about it, but
yeah, well,
that's
we know
it.
what that's all about.
But again, I think that fits what you're talking about, fits with that Sagittarius at 5 degrees, the old owl up the tree by Sabian symbols. Where
Mhm.
do we need to add the steadiness in human affairs? Where do we need to bring in self respect and normalcy to ground ourselves, to do the
Mhm.
moon, do the Saturn, as you said, to help us find where we need to be and so we can take it forward and be able to use these changing times in a good way.
Mhm. And remember, you're here on Earth for a reason. So
Right.
now you're still here, so you must have some work to do. So do your Saturn, do your chart, do your moon, do your sun, feed your planets every day. There's a brilliant astrologer named Carolyn Casey,
Mm-hmm.
and she wrote a book called Making the Gods Work for You. Which is hard to find in print, but it's on the internet audio,
It's worth
and
it.
it she gets you thinking about like what are all these are all your inner beings. These planets are all your inner voices, and sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
don't like something, so we give it to somebody else. They do it for us. But if we don't do it ourselves, it comes to us unbidden. So the more you can feed your planets and take them out dancing or doing whatever they like to go fishing or they want
Bring them conscious by working with
to be
them
conscious.
rather
But
than let them unconsciously run your show.
right, exactly. And that
Yeah.
will help it be a lot easier transition.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, when it's unstable, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the stability is moon is one of the most stable. And then the other thing you can do is do your sun because you're here to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to be. I'm here to learn how to be a Virgo.
Right. What's
Heather
the
and I are
highest
both
note?
going to be a Virgo. That's our job. We come in with the moon from the previous life. So I know how to be a Pisces. You put me into
Mm-hmm.
bed and I'm good for 12 hours. But I'm supposed to be a Virgo up cleaning things and organizing
Yeah.
things and doing all
And
that stuff
fixing people.
and
But you do
fixing.
that so well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to call this to an end. It's been absolutely delightful talking to you,
Thank you, Heather,
Anne.
for asking me.
I've
I was really
always
thrilled when you asked me. I'm like, ooh, this sounds like such fun.
asked, oh,
You know?
great. Well,
Well,
take
because we
care.
don't
Hmm.
really get to hang, and so
No,
it's yeah. That's
I
my
know. I
goal for
miss
this.
that.
That's my goal for this new chapter is like more hang time with the people I like. So
That
I've
sounds
really
wonderful.
enjoyed you inviting me to talk today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and everybody out there, just be, add to that stability of this coming month, and keep your eyes open for the metaphors of experience, because life may get very strange for you, or it may feel ordinary, but look at the symbols for that will give you a map for your transformation. And feed your planets. As Anne says, take care.